A paradox is something that doesn't make sense, yet it exists. And these paradoxes drive scientists out of their galaxy-sized minds. Imagine being an astrophysicist, and you're looking at something which lacks an explanation, but is nevertheless right in front of you, mocking you as if to say, science schmience. Prepare to share these experts' biggest headaches. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 mind-bending paradoxes science can't explain. 25. Olbers Paradox. Astronomer Heinrich Olbers is behind our first paradoxical head-scratcher. He lived in the 19th century and became puzzled that the night sky was dark. Isn't it supposed to be like that anyway, Heinrich? True, but we don't live in pitch black when the sun goes down. We have streetlights, not to mention stars. Billions and billions of them that should provide enough starlight for the heavens above. Why isn't everything more lit up? What's with those dark patches? Interesting question. I wish we knew the answer. 24. Newcomb's Paradox. A fair amount of concentration is required for this next paradox, which was devised by physicist William Newcomb and unleashed on the public in 1969. It's a simple-looking, but fiendishly complex challenge involving two boxes. The story goes that you have the option of taking one box or both. One contains a decent amount of money, and the other is a gamble. You'll open the lid and see either a shed load of dough or diddly squat. Where does the paradox come in? Well, there's apparently some kind of evil genius involved who knows what you're going to select and sabotages you accordingly. Can you beat the paradox and win all the riches for yourself? It really isn't clear that you can. This is a question philosophers have tied themselves in knots over for years. What's the point of challenge if there doesn't seem to be a straight answer? 23. Bonini's Paradox. If you like straight answers, then you will not like our next paradox. Not that it isn't a fascinating one. Professor Charles Bonini specializes in business matters. Indeed, he teaches at Stanford, so he's no slouch. He worked out that even if you have an explanation of a problem right in front of you, it isn't necessarily a good thing. Let's say you've built a replica model of a city to work out where to build a skyscraper. How helpful is that model going to be? According to Bonini's theory, it's pretty helpful, but also complex. It throws up additional issues and questions. Why? Because you're looking at an interpretation of the city, rather than the city itself. Should the model be vague, the architect is confused. Should it be incredibly specific, then the architect can also get confused, as there's always something that slips under the radar. Therein lies Bonini's paradox. 22. Region Beta Paradox. Have you ever felt a nagging pain in your stomach, but you hold off seeing the doctor until it becomes really painful? Maybe you were in a bad relationship, yet you kept going with it till the situation became intolerable. When you're hanging around like this, you're in what's known as the region beta. And with this comes the region beta paradox. Introduced in 2004 via a catchily titled article called The Particular Longevity of Things Not So Bad, it theorizes that people react more effectively when the stress gets too much. Why not take action when the pain is mild? Well, we just seem to love letting things fester, I guess. 21. Outcomes Paradox. Schizophrenia, where someone experiences delusions and confused thinking, among other symptoms, is one of the best known mental health issues on the planet. It's often misapplied by storytellers in a stereotypical way. But one intriguing and true detail about the condition is that it has a paradox. Outcomes Paradox was first explored in the 1960s, where it was revealed that people in developing countries cope better with schizophrenia than their wealthier, more comfortable counterparts. The island territories of Mauritius and Sri Lanka showed signs of this when the World Health Organization began looking into things there. They don't have the world's best healthcare system, yet that doesn't stop these places having better outcomes. Some experts question the accuracy of the Outcomes Paradox study. However, the WHO results are, and continue to be, compelling. Some have identified the different culture as a factor in why this paradox exists. 21. Ross-Littlewood Paradox. This paradox takes its name from authors J.E. Littlewood and Sheldon Ross. They both worked at different ends of the 20th century, so this wasn't a collaboration. Ross studied Littlewood's idea, which became the Ross-Littlewood Paradox, and expanded it into a true mind-boggler. The basic idea is to play put and take with a container full of numbered balls. Numbers between 2 and 10 are put into the container at precisely 1 minute to midday. What about the 1? Well, that's the thing. You apparently put all of them in there, but remove ball number 1 before you proceed. Then at 30 seconds to midday, you add numbers 11 to 20. This time you remove ball number 2. Then 15 seconds before midday, you throw in 21 to 30 and remove ball number 3. What's the point of all this? Because when you go to work out the number of balls in the container at the stroke of noon, you can't. There wouldn't be any balls left in there. I can see why this one might be considered slightly confusing. We should grab a bunch of balls and try it ourselves. 19. The Liar Paradox. Some paradoxes take seemingly straightforward things and make them frustratingly complex. The Liar Paradox is a great example of this. How does it work? Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys something that's clearly not true. Guys, I don't have a beard. Now, you'll hear this and think, that sentence he said is false. But is it though? We're about to be hit by a paradox. Dating back to the 6th century BCE, this will really boil your brain. My false sentence is false. However, it can also be true. I mean, it's false, yet if you categorize it as false, then it's true. It could be both true and false. It must have been really hard work playing a game of true or false in the 6th century is all I'm trying to say. 18. Barber Paradox. Bertrand Russell was one of the world's greatest thinkers. In the early 20th century, he thought of the Barber Paradox. It envisages a town where all men must be clean-shaven. Why? I don't know, maybe the government imposes a clean-shaven law. The town's barber is certainly going to be busy, but there's a catch. He is only able to shave those men who don't shave. Quite a weird situation, but one that throws us a paradox. The barber is a man, so who shaves him? Easy, you may think. The barber can shave himself. Nope. Instant fail. As I said, he can only shave those who don't shave themselves. Talk about a hairy situation. 17. Bottle Imp Paradox. Robert Louis Stevenson is known as the author of such classic works as Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He also has a mean way with a paradox. In the late 19th century, he wrote the story The Bottle Imp. This gave rise to a pickle that still confuses people today. The story focuses on a genie. Now, if you bought a bottle that contained a magical wish-granting figure, it would seem pretty cool. Trouble is, there are rules. You have to sell the bottle on and charge less than you originally got it for. And if you don't sell it, and it's still in your possession when you die, then you'll burn in hell for all eternity. Everyone would want to buy a bottle with a genie, right? Well, wrong. It's more complicated than you'd think. You're taking one heck of a gamble, not only in trying to sell it for the right price, but also in finding someone to accept the rules and regs that go with it. It's both a good thing and a bad thing. 16. Faint Young Sun Paradox. There are a lot of concerns about climate these days, yet the Earth has had it rough over the centuries when it comes to temperature and such. We presently live in what's called the Phanerozoic, the phase of our environment that started around 541 million years ago. Prior to this is a bit of a mystery, though we can assess the situation with modern analysis. This gave rise to the Faint Young Sun Paradox. In this paradox, all water on Earth was frozen, making the planet a giant ice rink. We assume this because the luminosity, or radiant power, was relatively weak back then. However, we apparently had a lot of liquid water around the pre-Phanerozoic period, just what melted our oceans. 15. GZK Paradox. Albert Einstein changed the world with his theory of special relativity. It led to a whole nother way of thinking when it came to how our planet and solar system worked. That said, there are some paradoxes out there which create a fly in the ointment type situation. GZK stands for Greisen-Zatsepin Kuzmin, the name of the team that worked out how much energy these rays could produce in 1966. The theoretical GZK limit should apply across the board, but it's not one size fits all. Enter the GZK Paradox, which demonstrates how some cosmic rays go over that limit. Because it's a theory in the first place, this contradiction can't be satisfactorily explained. 14. Curry's Paradox. I'm going to say something to you now that'll sound a little strange. If this sentence is true, then Germany borders China. This isn't some error by our scriptwriter, but the central part of Curry's Paradox. Taking its name from mathematician Haskell Curry, who talked about it in 1941, it shows that logic can be kind of a horse's ass sometimes. Experts would argue that prefixing any claim with "if this sentence is true" makes it true by logical standards. No way does Germany border China, but you could technically argue that it does purely because these words were used. Paradoxical and perplexing. 13. Elevator Paradox. Here's a fun one to imagine if you work in a building with elevators. Physicists Moritz Stern and George Gamow were thinking about things that go up and down in the 1950s, specifically the thing that got them between floors at their office. Stern was on an upper floor and observed that the first elevator to reach him was inevitably traveling in an upward direction. For Gamow, who was a few levels below, the first elevator tended to go the opposite way. You could suggest a reasonable explanation for this, but overall it's not too clear why this happened. 12. Tea leaf paradox. Nothing could be simpler and more satisfying than a cup of tea. Unless you're a scientist, in which you could turn it into a baffling ordeal. Stirring a cup of tea proved to be a fascinating challenge for Albert Einstein, who in 1926 explored why tea leaves behave the way they do. Chances are you don't use tea leaves. They're an old school thing, but what happens is they sink to the bottom of the cup in a donut-like mound. This is a puzzle because the stirring motion should result in a more even shape. The situation develops in the opposite direction to what you think it would. It's all to do with how the liquid flows inside the cup, though it still defies expectation. 11. Heat death paradox. This paradox sounds dramatic, and that's because it is. It addresses the end of our universe. Thermodynamics, or the science of how energy is expended, determines that ultimately the universe will suffer a heat death. This means that we'll eventually reach a point of maximum equilibrium, where all available energy has been distributed and everything is the same temperature. As for the heat death paradox, that uses the idea of heat death to challenge the idea that our universe is infinite in size. If our reality is infinite, then it would, by deduction, be infinite in age also. And that can't be, because if the universe is super ancient, why isn't it super warm all over, rather than fluctuating in its temperature? 10. Black hole information paradox. Black holes are a well-established part of how scientists explore space. Stephen Hawking added a big mystery to the mix when he devised the black hole information paradox in 1976. He revealed that, contrary to the laws of quantum physics, a black hole is capable of acting like a cosmic eraser. It acts in such a way as to prevent analysis of universal information. The radiation it has kind of wipes it, like placing the world's most powerful magnet next to a tiny hard drive. This contradicts what experts believe, which is that all things in space can be analyzed and traced back to their origins. 9. Waiting time paradox. Waiting for a bus is one of life's great inconveniences. Sometimes it seems like they take forever to arrive, at least from your perspective. Even a fast service coming every 10 minutes can cause confusion. It can also result in a paradox. The waiting time paradox dictates that you'll wait on average 10 minutes for a 10-minute bus, even if you arrived with, say, 5 minutes to spare. This is due to various factors, such as buses not being precise with their arrivals. I mean, how could they be, with all the traffic and such? The average waiting time of 10 minutes is a real head-scratcher, though. 8. Rule-following paradox. Ludwig Wittgenstein is one of the most famous names in philosophy. He worked in the first half of the 20th century and challenged people's ideas about life's fundamentals. Safe to say, this individual didn't stick to the rules. He even had a paradox connected to them. Wittgenstein stated that rules technically didn't work because there was always a way of arguing your case. An eloquent person can explain fairly easily how what they did was actually within the rules. 7. Ant on a rubber rope paradox. Why would an ant, or any kind of tiny creature, be crawling along an expanded length of rubber rope? This idea goes that the ant would reach the end of the rope, even if it was getting increasingly longer as someone or something stretched it. Intuitively, we think the ant would kind of go nowhere, like walking on a treadmill. Whereas in fact, as the rope moves, the ant goes with it. Eventually, it'll get to the end. That's a mathematical certainty. However it works, it appears puzzling, and so is referred to as a paradox. 6. False positive paradox. A false positive is used in connection with a misleading test result. The false positive paradox has been described in Little Brother, a novel by Cory Doctorow. This explored the subject of a 99% accurate test when looking for super aids. The paradox is that the result is actually showing a false positive. If you look at the statistic from the point of view that it's 1% inaccurate, then the story changes. You could then argue that the test is instead 99.9% inaccurate, due to the numbers tied up with that 1%, totaling 10,000 out of a million. Another way of looking at it is if 10,000 people have an HIV test and one tests positive, that isn't a guarantee they're actually infected. 10 others may test positive, yet in fact be perfectly healthy. The stats of someone being HIV positive is approximately 9%. 5. Coin rotation paradox. The circumference of a coin is a surprisingly tricky subject, especially when discussing the coin rotation paradox. If you lay a coin flat and rotate another coin around the outside of it with both heads facing outwards, a strange thing happens. Because you're watching the head and not the coin, it looks like it's rotated twice its own circumference. Actually, it's only traveled 1 times its circumference. The fact that the head rolls around twice fools you into thinking it's rolled longer than it has. 4. Low birth weight paradox. This next paradox shows that appearances can really be deceptive. Smoking during pregnancy is viewed as an absolute no-no for all kinds of health reasons. Yet when it comes to the babies of people who smoke, one seemingly fixed rule does not apply. If an infant has a low birth weight, then tragically the child has an increased likelihood of death. Bizarrely, if a smoker gives birth and their baby is low weight, it has a better chance of survival. 3. Potato paradox. It sounds like a ready meal, but this is another mind-bending paradox scientists can't explain. Who knew potatoes could be so complicated? As specified in 2004's The Universal Book of Mathematics, the paradox runs like so. Say you bought 100 kilograms of potatoes, but there's a problem. They contain 99% water. That's way more than science allows at 79%. Either way, you need to dry those spuds. After leaving them outside during the night, you find they now hold 98% water, and their overall weight is 50 kilograms? Yeah, you heard that right. The weight halved. Do the calculations and you'll find this bizarre conclusion to be accurate. 2. Parrondo's Paradox. Would you rather play a losing game or a winning game? This isn't some silly question. According to Parrondo's Paradox, devised by Juan Parrondo in 1996, you can use both winning and losing tactics to your advantage. How so? The theoretical scenario here is as follows. You have 2 game options. The first leaves you $1 worse off every time. The second has better odds. You lose $5 each time, bear with me, but that's only if your wallet contains an odd number. If it's even, then you win $3. The paradox here is how you flip this downbeat scenario. By starting with the second game and alternating between that and the first, you will reportedly make $2 every 2 rounds. Now, explain that. 1. Hydrostatic Paradox. Do you know much about fluid mechanics? I can't say I do either. That said, I'm sure experts have got all the details of the subject ironed out. Or have they? The hydrostatic paradox leaves some people in a state of confusion. It's described like this. If you filled 3 vessels of different shapes, what would the pressure of the fluid in the vessels be? Would it vary because they're different, or would it stay the same? I'd say the pressure would be different, but nope. The pressure on the base stays the same with all of them. If your mind is now bent beyond all repair, then I apologize. No one said paradoxes were an easy subject, but I hope that I've given you some intriguing insights into the things that drive even the brightest minds to distraction. So, Do you have a favorite paradox? Let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and check out our social medias, including my personal ones. Links in that description below. And if you've been bitten by the paradox bug and want even more information, you can watch another in-depth video, 25 most mind-blowing paradoxes of all time, right here. Click it, and I will see you soon for another list. None of that was a paradox. This sentence is false. This video is awesome. Not a paradox. It is.